My name is Eleanor Hart, and I am 60 years old. At this stage in life, I value quiet mornings more than most people appreciate. Retirement wasn't a cliff I fell off, it was a long, prepared glide. I had spent decades teaching high school literature, investing modestly but consistently, building a portfolio meant to support my later years. I never aimed to be wealthy. I only wanted stability, something my life had rarely offered in youth. My brother, David, is 7 years younger than me. Where I am methodical, he is improvisational, always dancing between ideas, chasing opportunities that disappear as quickly as they form. I love him, truly, but I learned long ago that loving someone does not require trusting them with your stability. Or at least, I believed I had learned that lesson fully, until the day I decided to let him help manage some of my accounts. It happened gradually. He had recently completed an online certification in financial planning and proudly announced he was starting to work with small clients. He asked if I'd let him practice with my portfolio. I resisted at first, but he was persistent, and I wanted to support him. I told myself it was harmless, he wouldn't manage the money itself, only help review my allocations, teach me new tax strategies, keep an eye on performance. That was all. Everything remained in my name. He had no access. Or so I thought. In hindsight, there had been warning signs. Small questions he asked that didn't align with the limited role I'd given him. A few too many inquiries about my brokerage's authentication system. Offhand comments about people sitting on money they don't even use. Statements I brushed off as observations, not intentions. Life felt ordinary the morning the IRS called me. I was watering my potted basil, waiting for the kettle to boil, when the phone rang with that unfamiliar government directory tone. I assumed it was a scam until the man on the line introduced himself, gave his identification number, and calmly stated, "Ma'am, we need to discuss the $95,000 stock liquidation you executed last month." My heart slowed. Not sped up, slowed. As though my body needed to comprehend before reacting. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I didn't liquidate anything." The agent paused, clearly expecting confusion, not contradiction. "Ma'am, our records show a liquidation followed by a transfer. We have the authorization. I just need to confirm some details." The kettle clicked off behind me. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And though I didn't yet know it, this was merely the first tremor before the quake. I hung up after providing what little clarity I could. And as I stood in my quiet kitchen, I felt the shape of a storm forming around me. Not metaphorically, viscerally. Something had moved without my permission, someone had crossed a line carved in legal stone. I didn't yet know who. But I knew the circle of suspects was painfully small. And I knew the truth would not stay hidden for long. The next day, the IRS called again, this time asking to verify the voice that had authorized the liquidation. When the IRS agent requested a time to review the recorded authorization call, a cold understanding crept through my chest. Voices are intimate. Distinct. No one imitates a 60-year-old woman's cadence by accident. I asked the agent one simple question, was the voice female? A soft rustle of papers, then, actually, ma'am, no. It was a male voice. A male voice. The possibilities collapsed instantly into a single name, David. My brother had the information, my birth date, my address, the brokerage I used. He had listened over the years as I discussed my investment strategies. I had even told him which stocks meant the most to me, my slow but loyal dividend fund, and shares gifted to me by my late husband, Thomas. Those shares weren't just financial assets. They were sentimental, the last tangible reflection of a man who understood stability the way some understand oxygen. Someone had liquidated them. Cashed them out like spare change. I sat down hard at the kitchen table, the wood cool beneath my palms. My mind tried to reject the conclusion even as it solidified. My brother would never steal from me. Of course not. Families disagree, argue, even hurt each other unintentionally, but theft? Fraud? Using my identity? But then again, money does strange things to people. Desperation breeds entitlement. And David had been struggling, his business attempts folding before they even unfurled, his savings depleted, his optimism forced rather than natural. Still, belief is a powerful blinder. And part of me clung to the hope that the voice on that authorization was someone else entirely. The IRS agent provided more details. The authorization wasn't rushed, it was confident. It referenced account numbers, withdrawal limits, the tax implications of liquidation. It was someone who knew enough to sound legitimate. "Ma'am," he said gently, "identity misuse is a serious matter. We're obligated to ensure you're aware of your rights." "My rights," I echoed, realizing how far things might go. "And the consequences, for the person who did it?" "There would be an audit," he said. "Potential charges, depending on intent." Intent. That word clung to me like burrs. I hung up and dialed my brother immediately. My breath steadied into something rehearsed, even though nothing about this moment had been rehearsed. He answered casually, as though nothing in the world had shifted under his feet. "Hey, Ellie." "What's up?" "Ellie." Only he still called me that. "I got a call from the IRS." My voice was calm, too calm. "They said someone liquidated $95,000 of my stocks." A small silence, like a match struck but not yet catching flame. "Wow," he said slowly. That's wild." I tested the ground. "They have the recorded authorization." A man's voice. The silence sharpened. This time, it crackled. I didn't accuse him. And he didn't confess. But something in his breathing changed, subtle and strained. The kind of shift you only notice when you've known someone since childhood. We ended the call with no clarity, but clarity was no longer needed. The truth hovered between us like smoke, visible even if unspoken. That night, I barely slept. I thought about my husband's shares, about trust, about the slow accumulation of a lifetime savings being dismantled in moments by someone who had once shared my blanket fort and defended me against bullies. By dawn, shock had hardened into resolve. The IRS agent called a third time, this time asking if I would like them to flag my account for identity misuse and notify the brokerage. Before I could decide how to proceed, I needed to understand the man my brother had become, not the boy I remembered. David and I were raised in a house where money behaved like weather, unpredictable, sometimes violent, rarely kind. Our father gambled. Our mother stretched paychecks like taffy, always thin, always fragile. I learned caution early. David learned improvisation. We coped differently, but we coped together. When I was 18, I went to college on scholarships and part-time jobs. When David was 18, he dropped out of community college to invest in a friend's startup that vanished within months. That pattern repeated throughout his 20s and 30s, burst after burst of enthusiasm, followed by collapse. Still, he wasn't malicious. Not then. My husband, Thomas, understood my soft spot for David. "You don't need to rescue him," he'd often remind me. "People grow by sitting in the consequences they create." But Thomas passed away 5 years ago, and with him went the person who gently kept me balanced. Grief softened my boundaries. I let my brother in more than I should have, into my home at times, into my planning, into my financial thinking. I didn't give him access. But I gave him proximity. And sometimes proximity is all a desperate person needs. Last Christmas, he told me he was finally turning things around. He said his new venture, something involving digital advertising, would work this time. His eyes had the same gleam I saw when he was 10 and convinced he could build a go-kart from scrap metal. But I also noticed his shoes, worn at the edges. The discoloration under his eyes. The way he dodged questions about income. If he had asked me for money directly, I would have said no. Not cruelly, firmly. But kindness, to him, has always looked like financial rescue. Perhaps he believed he was taking what he thought he deserved. Or borrowing, with no real plan to repay. Understanding the motive didn't lessen the betrayal. But it kept me from drowning in anger. It shaped the revenge I eventually pursued, not vindictive, but truthful. Not destructive, but clarifying. I sat on my porch that morning, watching the sun come up, feeling the ghosts of our shared childhood brush past me. I remembered teaching him how to read. Watching him fall asleep on the couch after long shifts. Helping him with job applications. All of it layered over the fact that he had impersonated me to strip my account bare. My phone buzzed. A voicemail transcription appeared. "This is Agent Samuels following up. If you believe someone misused your identity, we can notify the brokerage and freeze related accounts pending investigation." A freeze. That meant consequences for whoever touched my funds. Including my brother. I closed my eyes. I let myself feel the hurt fully, not just the financial blow, but the erosion of trust. Then I stood up and dialed the number. "I'd like to proceed," I said. Behind that decision lay a lifetime of history. But ahead of it lay something even more powerful, the truth. When the IRS contacted my brokerage, the investigator there revealed something I hadn't known: my brother had tried to open a second account in my name. The brokerage investigator, a composed woman named Ms. Lee, called me personally. "Ms. Hart," she said, "before we discuss the liquidation, I need to confirm something. Last week, someone attempted to open a secondary trading account under your name. The application was flagged due to mismatched voiceprint authentication." My spine straightened. "I never attempted to open another account." "That's what we suspected," she replied. The voice belonged to a male. A second attempt. So my brother hadn't just cashed out my stocks, he had planned more. The thought chilled me. Identity theft isn't spontaneous, it's structured. It requires intention, patience, a willingness to cross lines most people never approach. "May I ask," Ms. Lee continued, "does anyone close to you have access to your personal documents?" "No," I answered, then hesitated. "But my brother has familiarity with my information." "Familiarity," she repeated, and I could hear her typing. "Understood." Her professionalism made the situation feel even more real. I sensed she was already piecing together a timeline of fraud, calls, access attempts, and anomalies. My case was becoming a file, one with consequences. She asked if I wanted the account frozen pending a full investigation. "Yes," I said. "Freeze everything he touched." The moment I consented, something heavy lifted inside me. Not relief, resolve. Ms. Lee explained that account freezes trigger internal reviews. Transfers are halted. Associated accounts are flagged. And in many cases, the freeze ripples outward, especially when identity misuse links to multiple accounts. "Multiple?" I asked. She paused, then said carefully, "Ms. Hart, the individual who executed the liquidation transferred the funds to an account not in your name. That account has now been locked." My pulse quickened. "Locked, as in inaccessible?" "Correct. Including to the owner." I realized then, my brother probably didn't even know yet. He was walking around assuming he had succeeded, until he tried to access the money. Ms. Lee added, "We will be submitting all documentation to federal investigators, including the recorded call. You may be contacted for a statement." When I thanked her, my voice trembled with both gratitude and devastation. The truth gathering around me felt sharp as glass. After the call, I began collecting every piece of evidence I could: emails, texts, even old conversations where David asked about my account numbers, for planning purposes. I documented everything: dates, times, suspicions. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. And clarity, when wielded carefully, becomes power. That afternoon, I received a brief but telling text from him: "Hey, did you change something with the brokerage? My account isn't letting me in." Not his account, my account. I didn't reply. I simply saved the message. The investigation had begun. And it was uncovering far more than I expected. That evening, The IRS called once more, this time to tell me they had traced the phone number used for the fraudulent authorization. It was my brother's personal cell. Agent Samuels didn't mince words. The authorization call originated from a number registered to David Hart, he stated. Do you know this individual? The question felt surreal, like being asked if I recognized my own reflection. Yes, I answered. He's my brother. Silence followed, not awkward but respectful, as though the agent understood the depth of that acknowledgement. We will be conducting an audit, he said. There may be interviews. You will not be held responsible for unauthorized actions, but we will need your full cooperation. You have it, I replied. When I hung up, I sat very still, absorbing the enormity of the truth. My brother had not slipped, he had plotted. He had impersonated me, stolen from me, attempted to open more accounts, transferred funds, and left a trail of evidence that radiated from his own phone. This wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't desperation alone. It was a choice. Yet even as my anger simmered, there was an ache beneath it, a sorrow that felt ancient. Betrayal from family doesn't land in the present, it echoes through decades of shared memories. Every birthday candle, every car ride, every late-night talk, all of it felt tinged now with a shadow I couldn't ignore. I decided I needed to hear his voice. Not on paper. Not through an investigator. Directly. He picked up on the first ring. Ellie, he said breathlessly, listen, something weird is going on with my accounts. I think there's been a mix-up. There's no mix-up, I said quietly. And you know it. A long, brittle pause. Then, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the $95,000 you stole from me. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was calculation. I was going to pay it back, he said finally, the words tumbling out. I just needed a boost. You have more than enough. Stop, I said. Calm, unwavering. This is not a loan. This is identity fraud. He exhaled sharply, frustration rising. You're blowing this out of proportion. You impersonated me to the IRS and the brokerage. You transferred money into your own account. And they traced the call to your phone. He froze. I could hear it, the stillness of someone realizing they were standing on a cliff's edge they created. Ellie, please, he whispered. We can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we were managing it together. No, I said. Not loudly. Just finally. Because the truth had fully unfolded, and now there was no space left for denial. He began pleading, panicking, his sentences dissolving into fragments. I listened for a moment, not out of sympathy, but out of closure. Then I said, the investigation is already in motion. Whatever happens now is a consequence of your choices, not mine. I hung up. For the first time since the IRS call, I felt steady. I had stepped out of the fog and into something bright, sharp, unignorable. The truth was no longer hiding. The truth was walking toward its inevitable conclusion. The next morning, Ms. Lee informed me, your brother's accounts have been formally frozen. He will learn of the audit today. David showed up at my house that afternoon without calling. I heard the frantic knocks before I reached the door. The moment I opened it, he pushed past me, pacing the living room like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. They froze everything, he said, voice shaking. All my accounts. My checking, my savings, even my business card. And the IRS called me asking for documents. They said the audit is identity-related. What does that even mean? It means, I said calmly, closing the door behind me, that you triggered a federal investigation using my name. He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of fear and desperation. Ellie, you can stop this. You can tell them it wasn't fraud. But it was fraud. I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing. I planned to invest it and pay it back before you even noticed. You liquidated my husband's shares, I said. The ones I told you I'd never touch. He flinched. The truth, when spoken aloud, often hits harder than silence. You don't understand, he insisted. I had no choice. You had choices, I said quietly. You just didn't like any of the responsible ones. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I'm going to lose everything. You put everything at risk yourself, I said. Including me. His head snapped up. So you're just going to let them destroy my life? No, I said, meeting his eyes. You did that. I'm simply not shielding you from the consequences. He stared at me, searching for the softness I used to offer him. But grief teaches boundaries. Betrayal enforces them. I sat across from him. No yelling. No dramatic speeches. Just truth delivered with the steadiness of someone who has spent a lifetime holding others up. I will not lie for you. I will not obstruct an investigation. And I will not fix what you broke. He swallowed hard. I'm your brother. And I'm a woman whose identity you stole, I replied. For the first time, he looked ashamed, not panicked, not defensive, but deeply aware of the line he crossed. What do I do? He whispered. You tell them the truth, I said. You cooperate. And you face whatever comes. He stood, defeated, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back and said, I never thought it would come to this. Neither did I answered. But here we are. He left without another word. And the house, once shared with echoes of our childhood laughter, felt hollow and still. 2 days later, the IRS notified me that David had officially become the subject of a federal identity fraud inquiry. Federal inquiries do not move quickly, nor do they move gently. They move with precision, the way water carves canyons, slow but undeniable. The IRS gathered phone records, brokerage documents, recorded calls, transfer histories, and timestamps. Each piece aligned into a clear picture of intent. And though I wasn't privy to every detail, I was informed of the essentials. David cooperated, reluctantly at first, then fully when he realized the trail was irrefutable. He admitted impersonating me. He admitted transferring the funds. He admitted attempting to open the second account. And though he tried to frame his motivation as temporary desperation, the investigators cared about actions, not excuses. The brokerage permanently restricted him from handling accounts in any advisory capacity. His attempted venture dissolved. And most painful for him, the IRS initiated a repayment plan he would be bound to for years, one that couldn't easily be escaped. He told me during one strained phone call, they said this goes on my record, Ellie. I'll never get certified for anything financial again. That's one of the consequences, I said gently. He sighed, exhausted. I didn't think they'd take it this far. They didn't, I reminded him. You did. As for my funds, they were restored over time. The brokerage refunded the unauthorized transaction while they pursued recovery from his accounts. My husband's shares could not be returned in their original form, but the monetary value was reinstated, and I placed it carefully into a memorial fund I knew he would have approved of. Friends asked whether I felt vindicated. But revenge, when ethical, is not about triumph. It is about equilibrium, the restoration of truth. And truth had been restored. Not effortlessly, not joyfully, but appropriately. One afternoon, months later, my brother visited at my request. He looked older, weighed down not by punishment but by recognition. I'm sorry, he said quietly. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't dramatic. But it was sincere. And sincerity is the only apology that matters. I nodded. I hope, I said, that you learn from this. Not because you were punished, but because you endangered the one person who always wanted to believe in you. He swallowed hard. I know. There would not be full reconciliation. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But there was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is its own form of justice. As he prepared to leave, he asked softly, "Do you hate me?" I looked at my brother for a long moment before answering. It wasn't a dramatic pause, just a genuine consideration of the question. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. But I don't trust you. Trust is something rebuilt slowly, if at all. He nodded, accepting the truth rather than resisting it. That alone marked a kind of progress. After he left, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, letting the quiet settle around me. The world had not ended. My finances were secure again. My identity was protected. And justice, in its measured way, had been served. But the deeper transformation was something quieter, had reclaimed not just my accounts, but my boundaries. My autonomy. My sense of self after grief. As I watched the sun sink low, I thought about the choices we make, not the ones born of convenience or fear, but the ones that define us. When my brother betrayed me, I could have protected him. I could have smoothed the path, hidden the evidence, minimized the damage. But doing so would have cost me my integrity. Revenge, in my story, was not the pursuit of harm. It was the pursuit of truth. Ethical revenge is simply clarity enforced. And clarity can be transformative. I hope my brother rebuilds his life. I hope he learns discipline, responsibility, humility. But those hopes are separate from accountability. Family bonds are not shields. Love is not a loophole. As I finish telling this story, I offer you the reflection I gained from the experience. Family may share blood, but not financial responsibility. Protect your identity. Protect your boundaries. And never apologize for choosing honesty over enabling harm. And to you listening, I ask, what would you have done in my place? And what boundaries in your own life need fortifying?